Good afternoon, everyone. This is Cathy Rodriguez Aguirre, President and CEO for the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to this week's Juntos with Cathy. It's time we kind of check in with different things that are going on in our community, leadership, community members, just to find out, what they're doing to make Sacramento a little bit better than it was the day before. So I'm excited today because we're actually just going to have an internal conversation. For those of you that were with us this on Tuesday, either in person, which was very limited due to COVID rules, or watched it live through our Facebook and YouTube channels, you will know that on Tuesday we had our annual State of Hispanics. And what we did is we actually released the Hispanic Economic Report. And this is the very first regional report about our Latino community over 6 counties. So we're very excited to be able to present this, to have this data that's really going to help drive our work, and we hope that work of others in our community. And the person that actually led the charge for this and really made sure that it all happened was our Vice President here at Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Juan Novello. So I'm going to bring Juan on so we can talk a little bit about how this transpired, what it looks like, and what kind of we hope this is going to do for our chamber. And again, the region overall, as we really try to build through an inclusive economy. Hi, Juan. It's good to see you.
Hi, boss.
Yes. So, Juan, I want to make sure, as we do this, that we really do say, I tease and say a lot, but, really when we brought you on, one of the things I very much realized about you and what you could bring to any organization is that you're someone who's so innovative and creative, as we've heard people on our board, everyone say, but then we need to give you a runway, to be able to take these big ideas and have a platform for them. And one of the biggest ones you came was actually, coming in and saying, we need to have some sort of report. We need to have data that can really drive the work we do. And it's interesting because I was going back into my own information and just other interviews that I've done in the course of the time that I've been here at the chamber. And I think my very first day, I did an interview with the Sacramento Bee, and they said, what do you want to happen? They said, I really want us to become like the Data Institute, following best practices that Hispanic Chamber in San Antonio does. And of course, that was about 7 years ago. And in order to even get to this point, there was a lot of work that needed to be done. So you came at the exact right point that I think everyone was ready to suddenly take on this type of project. So having said that, tell us, from your background, what made you decide, what, the first thing I want to make sure we accomplish here at the chamber is doing this economic report?
Well, it has been a labor of love. I mean, I've been in chambers of commerce now for almost 10 years. You and Alice and Veronica hired me right out of college when I moved to Sacramento. And I hope that, you see that there's a different person, not only at a personal level, but also in leadership. But throughout my time with the chamber, leading the state organization and then the California Latino Economic Institute, there was a lot of learning and watching. And I think that for you and those who are watching, that there's, at least from my perspective, there's a lot of great work that needs to get done that at times gets behind or ignored because of the politics or because of the different things that come on the day-to-day that really don't create the impact that is needed. So this report, as you mentioned, when I got the first copy, it's like I was watching my firstborn. And this is not the first report that I have produced for an organization. But it definitely meant a lot, not only because, it was done for an organization that not only I work, but practically stopped me born as a chamber executive, gave me my first opportunity in this arena, but it's home. And so I get to see this every day. And seeing that, again, there's a lot of conversations on not only how the economic recovery is happening and how our communities continue to be impacted. There's a lot of different systems and structures that needs to be shaken. And at times when you and I, or even our board members, are making the case and arguments, not only to city council members and corporate America and communities, there's always an economic conversation that is missing. And, we can have a political conversation, we can have a social conversation, we can have a cultural conversation as much as possible, and we can have those really passionate type of conversations all day long. But ultimately, our businesses need money to be able to grow and to
Yeah.
keep their employees open. Our people need money to pay for their education, to be contributors to our economy. And as a whole, our day to day just requires money. And so, there's a lot of different efforts that are done both from a private, public, and even community level that at times are not strategic in nature and that really not don't necessarily have an economic strategy at its core. And ultimately, what that report does is provide that baseline to really understand where we are, which, I'm not surprised on a lot of those things, just because of the work that I've been doing and the bells that I've been ringing for about, I don't know how many years. But I think that through the economic recovery efforts, whether that was CARES, was ARP funds, um, there's a lot more that can be done to ensure that we're not repeating the same mistakes and that we really bring a more a structural change that can really break the cycle to where we have been as a community. It can really open the opportunities not only from economic prosperity, but understanding where we are and where we can be added into how our community is growing, how our region is growing, and how California is growing. Fifth economy in the world, and yet there's so much that needs to be done. You don't really have to have a conversation or a heated conversation on what that reality is. I think it's time for us to have a conversation on the solutions and how can we ensure that we not only driving and diversity and inclusion agenda at a surface level, but we really been um, like we really have the tangible efforts to make those tangible investments and solutions that are needed in our communities. So like I said before, it's my baby in many ways because it means a lot to me. It really does. And I come from the community. I'm not from Sacramento. I grew up in San Diego. I grew up in City Heights, the poorest neighborhoods in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the state. I saw that dream mat at that point back in the early 2000s, like late 2000s, but 2012, 2011, 2010, die so many times or not pass so many times, both at the state and at the federal level. And I always question this. I'm like, if we were to see the dream mat at that point, which later on passed, from an economic perspective, and what this particular group of students who are not all of their own, they were brought into the US, they had jobs, were paying taxes, or how much we could make, how much contributions we could actually make to our communities and how much impact we could have to the economy, the conversation would have been completely different. I was given the opportunity to, go to school and then, through DACA, through President Obama's executive order, to then be able to get a job at the chamber. That practically changed my life. And I know that if I'm able to, if not through this report and the heated conversations that I have with the board and the rest of the community members, if I'm able to create that type of opportunity for other individuals, I know that we could be better off. And I know that both from economic perspective, from a culture perspective, from a political perspective, we could be at a whole different level. And I'm just really excited to see that.
Well, Antoine, you know what? I really appreciate you, Juan, is that you're always, willing to share your story in such an authentic way. The fact I know that a lot of people don't realize that, you were DACA, right? A permanent resident, and very soon, moving forward towards citizenship, which I've said before, we're all going to be there to applaud, that moment, since I feel like we've been watching you, over the course of 10 years. And it's been an exciting thing for me to get to watch, your growth in leadership, to do all that. But what's so important in being able to, share that is, I know I've often said, I don't have a similar story, right? I'm a generation and a half. My mom was born here and my dad immigrated here from Tonaya, Jalisco. But it's that idea of that I know that this is what I look like and represent. and that it's important for people to hear these stories so that hopefully it adds a realness to it. And I think that's a part of it too, right? There's this economic agenda everyone is, contributing to, that we really, as a chamber and as a community really need to be the force, sharing that story, which is critical, which is why we're going to keep holding this up, right? Which is why this report is so important. But it's also reminding people how faceted we are. There's so many pieces. And the reason I bring that up is that when I looked at this report, and I know you heard me say this, I was really struck with the very first thing when I look here at the citizenship part, right? So we go to the very beginning, and it's here that we've got children that are under 18, 94% are born here in the United States. And for me, who is growing up knowing that, voting is such a critical part, right? And I know that, for you understand this part. For my dad becoming a citizen in that very first vote, like for us, it's something that it's a privilege. And so it's something so incredibly important to us, right? So, but I also know that it's, something that's ingrained in my family, not necessarily because everyone has been reaching out to us in a way that's effective, right? So I think I shared this past, Tuesday at the event and other speeches that when we looked at the past couple of elections, and it was Mike Madrid when he did the presentation, that the things that were important to the Latino community actually started with economy, jobs, healthcare, education, and immigration was, important. It was still like in the top, 10, but it wasn't the top one. And so why that's important is because how are we going to reach out to our communities, if you're not in the community and even within our community effectively to make change if you don't understand where we're coming from? And so I look at this and think, this is your next block of voters. And I've already seen how much more engaged they are in what's going on around them. And so for the powers that be that are coming, to our market, which we know right here at the chamber, how many times, especially this month, Hispanic Heritage Month, where people suddenly remember this is where we need to tap in and do all that, which is great. I love an amplified month, but it does mean how are we going to make, how are we going to change the narrative? So people realize you need to come at us realizing that we care about the same issues everyone else does, but we've been underinvested in for so long. And the numbers tell us that if you do not make a change, then actually your success is based on our success, right? And that's probably a hard statement for people to hear there, but here's a reality. So what do you think? You fall in that millennial range still there. And, you were talking about what is, what's the most important message that people could be sharing with us, knowing now, you aren't looking at this demographic in the way that we're actually seeing the demographic is.
Well, there's a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different things that I could recommend or I can really push. One, you touch it fairly, generously. It's our narrative. At times, whether that is because of the mainstream or the political conversations that are more heavily really push on us and who we are as a community, there's that sense that we become that. And in reality, we're not. And the second part is, we're 22% of the populations here in that region. And we look at things from a regional perspective. If that 22% is not doing well, economically speaking, we're in trouble. And if those powers to be, as you mentioned, don't realize that and don't really figure out ways to ensure that not only us, but the other communities and other segments of our community are also thriving, then we really are not looking at things from a strategic and economic perspective that will put us in the right position. And I often mention this to a lot of the elected officials that we meet. Sacramento cannot grow through the model of other bigger cities that we continue to see are scrambling. They are pricing out communities in a way that really creates those different levels of economic inequality that doesn't really support everybody across the region. There's no reason why a lot of our families needs to travel 2 to 3 hours single way to go work. That's the time that they're not able to spend it with their families. That's time that they're not able to dedicate to personal time, mental health, or their own physical health. It just doesn't make any sense. So what we hope is that, what I hope and what the chamber has been really doing, and thank you to you and the board on trusting me that on this direction, is that we really need to start thinking the way we do things in a way that, again, not only breaks those cycles, but really ensures that we are elevated together in a way that really helps everybody. My former boss used to say this, and I still take it to heart: what is good for Latinos is good for everyone. What is good for Hispanics is good for everyone. We're not here to take people's jobs. We're not here to, just grab as much as possible. We're hard-working people who the only thing we want to do is just to not only have a better life, but be able to be part of this that region is becoming, and really be part of the economy. So again, I it's a conversation, and is at times something that it's really uncomfortable for people to have, not only in those tables of decision making, but also at home. And what I hope is that not only they're able to download that report and be able to see where things are at, but that they're able to see themselves there, and they're able to identify where is it that they need to change as individuals, prioritize at home. We have such a huge influence and power, not only politically, but also with our money. Amazon is Amazon, and they're going to continue to do well for years to come. That little señora from the esquina that is selling tacos, or the taco stand that it's in our parking lot 2 blocks away, needs the money more than Amazon does. So what we do as a community to take care of each other is really important. How we prioritize our budget, how we spend our money, how we prioritize the decisions that are not only impacting our household, but that neighborhood in which we are part of, it's going to be really important. And so I'm hoping that, this is just the beginning of a lot of work that is ahead, and a lot of really tough conversations that need to be had, not only in our households, with elected officials, within our organization, with corporations, but also with the community as a whole.
Yeah, and you also touched on something else there, Juan, which is, really key. And so, where we spend our dollars, who are we supporting? I think that you came back and realized, that we set a culture that, for me, our small business is our mission. Yeah. That's where supporting everything we do always comes back to how is this assisting our small business? And I really found, on Tuesday in our panel, which I've heard a lot of good feedback about the panel and the presentation, things shared, and in particular with Lisandro, who is Chando's Tacos, right? Mm-hmm. And very real. And I, some of the things that he shared was, one, when he looked at this report, he saw his employees. Like, this very much resonated with the way, he grew up and the people that he was supporting, and why, as he looks at his own business, which now is 200 employees, so not a little amount, over 4 counties, including Georgia, the state, so has someone here who's growing and had a different pathway to get to where he's at. And so I think we also, share that there is there's success has different definitions for many people. Right. And I want to go to him because that's the entrepreneurship part. So anyone, when they pick this up, what they are going to see is, we asked Sacramento State, when we work with them, give us the profile of our Latino community, Hispanic community across the 6 counties, right? Baseline. We want to make sure people realize this is something we're going to build upon, and look at that. And then our next step is to really, bring in now, what does that business look like and what that's set? Because I think we'll find that our percentages in entrepreneurship are very high. Right. But to your point, it's like, what does that investment look like? How are we helping them grow? When Sandro spoke, he said, and I've had conversations with him in the past, he's kind of just started, kind of figured things out. And now we found like Chamber of Life and programs and things like that already at the 200 employees. So we need to do a better job still of educating and getting those resources, and having our partners really understand that it's more than you coming into a class. We need this financial investment because they are contributing back to the economy, very much so. I've said they're anchors in our neighborhoods. These are people that gave jobs to kids. They're in pandemic. essential workers, but the businesses also kept the products and services that our community needed going out there. Um, it's a critical thing. We need to remember that that's part of it, the small business of everything. In this report though, and even with you, Juan, the time always goes by so fast in my with those things. But I want to make sure that everyone knows, and I'm going to let it. You pointed out, we didn't just print out a report and say, here is this gorgeous report. Sacramento State, helped us do. Sierra Health Foundation helped underwrite it. Threefold, created this whole thing. Because on page 22, which I think is probably the most important page out of everything, the stakeholders came together and said, great, here's this data. Well, here's the priorities from this data that we are holding ourselves accountable to as an organization, but also everyone who's looking at this, right? We need to, when you look at this, where do you see yourself as part of this solution? Where are you going to help make, this change? So why don't you talk a little bit about how this came about and really how this is going to drive, how we're going to drive everything moving forward.
Yeah, and there was a lot of conversations as of we had the example of Arizona. This particular report is modeled after a Long Beach effort similar to it. They have done a lot of great work, but to us, not only we're doing it from a regional perspective and added the personal stories to profiles to the data. But we really wanted to figure out how we can start to build the ecosystem that would really drive the change. And that really goes to a lot of community organizations and leaders from across the state, from across the region, not only from a public perspective, from a corporate perspective, or from the elected officials that are engaged through the process, because we just didn't want it to be empty buckets that were going to go nowhere. Every single one of those priorities are not only connected to a data that was identified as an opportunity for us to engage, but there's a lot of efforts behind it that will drive a lot of economic prosperity for everybody across the region. So if you see it on the following page 23, you see everybody who was engaged, and you have from corporates, people from Placer, people from Yellow. We really wanted to ensure that we had a deeper understanding of the data that will bring priorities into the conversations. And if you recall, those conversations were really passionate. They were really intentional in that regard, but it was also our opportunity to continue to bring more people together. So on Tuesday, that was just a show. In my regard, in my perspective, that work it's already starting, and we'll continue to knock on people's doors and accept as many invitations as possible. Knock on people's doors too, to ensure that we're able to have this type of conversations at a community level, so we can really strategically continue to push this agenda. But and before you asked me that question, you were really mentioning a few different things and a few different data assets, and I want to be cautious. I want to caution you, and I know you do know this, but the community as a whole. Yes, there's a lot of things that can be improved. And yes, there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of things that we're doing extremely well. You mentioned entrepreneurship. And yes, small businesses continue to be the backbone of our economy, and Latinos continues to be at a really high number when it comes to opening businesses and so on and so forth. But we need to really start to figure it out. How can we interconnect what's really happening? Are businesses being open because other opportunities are not being presented in corporate America and in City Hall? I mean, we see reports of the numbers, the lack of diversity in a lot of companies and a lot of structures of government. So why is one not connected to the other one? And there's another point that I want to make, and I know I haven't talked to you about this, but it's when it comes to broadband, and when it comes to Latinos being able, having access to internet through their phones, and then that's something that, yes, it's a high number, and that's a great thing, but we cannot do our taxes from our phones.
Yeah.
we cannot write, or our people cannot really do a lot of the paperwork that is needed through our phones. Yes, there's a lot of technology that now is advancing, but we really need to start to figure out why is it that is happening, and why is it that although we're doing something so well in one regard, when it comes to education, there's not really much of advancement. And a lot of our kids are not really being prepared to the level that they need to be prepared to go into the UC system. So it's not only looking at the data from the single line, but really looking at the interconnectivity between all of them. I think you heard me said this before, and I'll mention Mike Madrid out of this. Opportunities are opportunities, but desperation is something else. So when our businesses are opening their businesses, when our people are opening businesses, is it out of entrepreneurship? That yes, there is that spirit within our community, or it's out of desperation, because even though we are the highest number, our number of receipts, meaning our actual economic impact that we have, is not as significant when it comes to entrepreneurship, and we only employing one or two, if not only one, it being that sole proprietor. So it's a lot of those conversations that needs to be had, and I think that this can be a tool not only for our elected officials but for our communities to really start to frame those conversations into policy and into structural changes that I know that you and I will continue to look for and continue to push for as we continue to grow this organization.
You're so right on, Juan, and you're right. And I think that yes, that often stuck in my mind too when Mike Madrid presented for us pre-pandemic, right at that State of Hispanics, when he said, how many businesses, was it desperation versus aspiration? And I think that this is probably a good point to be that when you see our organization talk about workforce development, retraining, and looking at education opportunities, that yes, and then, like I said, we serve small business. For me, that
Boss, you're off the screen. People can hear you, but I think you clicked your camera. Yes, you did. They're commenting. That's what I want to mention it. There we go. There we go.
So this might be the way of letting me know that our time is coming to an end if my camera is now also doing that. So again, let me repeat so you can see me. Great news about Juan coming soon. We're excited about that. I do want to take a moment to thank the entire team, though, because we had a lot of people working with us. We have a great team of people that are coming in here, Alma and David, who are handling Emprende and Level Up. Jesse, who's our promotora, who when I gave stats, 400 businesses just since January that she's visited, developed a relationship with, and continually goes to see, out there. And we've had Lily Wyatt Cortez, doing our PR and communications, all the different media hits that are coming, is because we really, really took seriously that we are in charge of our narrative and our story, and we definitely want to be sharing it out there. So this report can be found on our website. There's more information there. Telemundo was essential in helping us put these videos and everything together and threefold. So many people to make this report, which also lets you know how many people in this community realize how important this information is to get out to everyone. So thank you for everyone that did that. Thank you for joining us here Thursday. Look for us next week. We'll be back Thursday at noon with more information and more to share. And for now, have a great day.